Hello and welcome to the Unit 5 micro lesson. Now, I continue to add to my different code so I can show you some different examples and you kind of see the reoccurring code and what changes from week to week. Now, in this particular micro lesson, what I'm discussing is I've actually created a function and a procedure. Now, you're going to have to leave some of this up to your imagination because I don't want to make it too easy because I want you to kind of get in here and dig around with it. All right, but the first thing I want you to see is this private function called function sample, okay? Notice the keywords, private function, right? Then we have function sample, which is the name. Now this is the by-val int number. Now that means it's taking in a number, right, some sort of integer that's by-val, meaning it is making a copy of it. It is not actually changing the variable. And since it says as integer over here, that means it has the expectation to return an integer value. That means after it gets all the way said and done, it's going to return an integer value from where it's called. Okay? All this does, it takes in a value called int number. It takes int number equals int number times 2. It multiplies it by 2. Then it takes int number equals int number times 4. Then it multiplies it by 4. Then int number equals int number divided by 5. It multiplies it by 5. And then returns the number. Notice in each one of these cases, it uses the original value, multiplies it by 2, and then saves it back. So it's always writing over itself. So if I sent, let's say int number was 1, right? Int number 1 times 2 is 2. So now int number will be 2 in this line, right here, right? If I send 1 originally, now int number 2 will be there. So now if I set int number times 4, so 2 times 4 is 8, right? 2 times 4? Yeah, 2 times 4 is 8. So now int number is 8. And then what? 8 divided by 5, right? And then that is the new int number, and then it returns it. Now if I go all the way down here, these are two different ways that you can send variables to a function or procedure. Int samp num, meaning that I've declared int samp num as an integer, and I'm calling function sample, and I'm sending it the value 5. So here's function sample. Notice the names match up, so it'll do the call. It'll send the value 5 as this number here. So it'll do 2 times 5 is 10, so int number will be 10, and then 10 times 4 is 40, and so the int number will be 40, and then 40 divided by 5, so the int number will be 8, and then it returns 8, right? So now I return, now after I do the call, I return back to my line, and I say, okay, int samp number is going to be 8. Now it says function sample DEC earnings. So the second time it calls is with whatever value the users put in DEC earnings, which I don't know at this point in time. But then it does all these calculations up here, right, with whatever value DEC earnings is. And now I have int samp num1 and int samp num2. Now, notice the things that make this a function. I take in a value, I do some sort of calculations with it, I have an expectation to return a value. Now in your discussion, it asks, is this in fact a function, or can you make a function do multiple values? Normally a function returns one value. As soon as you start messing with a function that's messing with more than one value, it's kind of like a procedure. I'll let you kind of play with the differences between the two. But kind of going along these lines, I created a sub called number sample. And all this is, and the point behind this is I can create a procedure or a function that can be called multiple times. You'll notice I called function sample twice right here. I'm only calling number sample once, right? But you'll notice the syntax is a little different. Private sub, number sample, takes in two values, int first num and int second num, both by ref. Now, when we take in these values by ref, that means it's going to be able to change the values of the variable in the function, or excuse me, in the procedure. So in this particular case, when it says int second num plus 1 equals int first num, that is actually changing the value of int first num. Notice I don't return it here, but since I send it by reference, here's my by ref call, Whatever's sent as first num, which is the sample num, right? Notice that they're in the same location, but they don't have any values. It returns, and it returns the actual change. So there's no return value, but it's giving access, it's giving this particular procedure access to the value of that variable. By sending it, whoops, dang it, I shrunk it. But by sending it by int sampnum2, by sending it by reference, I'm sending the actual location of that variable, so it's going to make those modifications to it. So I use this to calculate int sampnum1, int sampnum2, and then I send both of these values here. Basically, all this does is add 1 to it, but notice both of these values are sent by reference. Now, what's important about these variables that you send, or also parameters, that's a special name for it, it only has to match in data type. It does not have to match the actual name. You'll notice first num here lines up with sample num here, and they're both the same data type. It's integer. You'll notice int sampnum2 lines up with int second num here. They don't have to match the exact name, but they do have to match the same data type. So I could come in here and I could do, and now it's going to throw me an error because I haven't declared these variables, but I can do number sample int num 3000 because I'm running out of stuff to say, int num 3002, right? So in this particular case, it'll still be underlined because I haven't declared them. But the expectation is that int number 3000 and int number 3002, which are both horrible variable names, okay? But please don't do that. That's a horrible variable naming. But what it does is, as long as this matches the same data type as this, you're golden. So int num 3000 and int first num should both be integers. Int num 3002 and int second num should both be integers. So that gives you some food for thought, a little bit on the differences between functions and procedures. I try to do it in a very nebulous sort of way because I don't want to detract from the actual assignments this week or the challenges this week, but this gives you something to kind of wrestle with. Thank you very much for your time. Just keep things coming. You're doing a good job.